Well, it's Labor Day weekend, and you could say the high school football season's going a little lightning quick. All right, on that note, you can probably guess where I'm going with this. A lot of games being pushed back due to lightning. Kind of a very weird week, too. But you know what? We got our games in the books, and we got our guy, Justin Kenny of Optimum Performance Sports. I'm Josh Hagan filling in for Glenn Marini on this Labor Day weekend. And Justin, like I mentioned, very, very weird weekend. But, we got the games in. We got the games in.
We did, whether they were half games or full games over 1 day, 2 days. We got through, and there was only one no contest in the area with Wayne and South Bend Riley. So, it was a weird night because there really wasn't a lot of rain, but there was a lot of lightning, and the IHSAA rule, see a lightning bolt in 30 minutes and restart the clock every time you see one. So it played havoc with the schedule on Friday night, but good job, teams, athletic directors, everybody involved to get the majority of those games in. And now we are able to talk a complete week 2 and then heading into conference play starting now in week 3.
Yeah, that's the big thing. So 2 weeks of non-conference player in the books. We now move on to conference play, especially in the SAC, NE8. I guess the biggest thing I want to ask you, Justin, through 2 weeks, what has really caught your attention? Because we've got some 2-0 teams. If we were to do like a bingo board of teams that are 2-0, you've got teams like Lakeland, you've got teams like Garrett, Concordia, teams we
Prairie
probably
Heights.
Exactly. Yeah, Prairie Heights. Exactly. Teams we didn't necessarily expect to have a lot of early season success, but lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah, and conversely, you look at Olmsted being 0-2 and Dwenger being 0-2 and Carroll being 0-2. Now, granted, they've been playing some really powerful opponents, but it is kind of cool to see, Josh. We get so focused on the upper echelon teams, and they'll have their day in the sun once we get into the playoffs, but some of these programs where every win matters, we didn't mention Huntington North too, at 2-0 as well, beating Northrop. It is huge for these programs, and we'll see if they can continue it into league play. But at the very least, it's been a great couple weeks for some of the programs that maybe we looked at and said, could they get even 2 wins all season? And here they are sitting 2-0.
All right, well, time to get serious. We mentioned conference play getting underway for week 3. Let's go ahead and start with the SAC. Kind of mentioned with some of those teams that kind of had a bumpier road in non-conference play, like Snyder. They get a chance to take on Concordia. Carroll, who played competitively at center group before that game got called off. They have a chance to get right with Southside. Some of the other matchups we're keeping an eye on: Wayne at Homestead, Bishop Dwenger at Northside, and Northrop at Bishop Luers. So I want to start with that last matchup. You've got Bishop Luers kind of playing 2 coin flip games. The game against Leo could have gone either way. They fell on the wrong end of that one. And then New Haven, who's been kind of surprising a lot of people, playing 2 very close games. Luers finds a way to come out of that one. And then Northrop, we know they can put some points on the board. Can they stop teams? That's the biggest question. But, a lot of interesting storylines when you look at that Northrop and Bishop Luers matchup.
Yeah, Josh, you're right. I mean, you look at Bishop Luers and being able to get that win over New Haven, and it was a lot closer than any of us expected. New Haven making that great charge at the end, couldn't pull it out. But the night that D Hogue had, the night that Davion Surrey had, in terms of 5 total touchdowns, a couple kick returns, 3 kick returns, and punt returns, and then a pair of receiving touchdowns. This is a team in Bishop Luers that we're still maybe trying to figure out based on what they have offensively. We knew that Jalen White coming back was going to be a big thing at wide receiver. Everything else was kind of up in the air. And that's going to be the challenge, I think, going up against a team in Northrop and the team that they're able to put out offensively. When you look at the mismatches they have with guys like Jamari Brown and Jaquaden Guilford and David Callison behind center. So I think this is going to be an interesting game. Can Northrop get enough stops? They couldn't do that against Huntington North. They could score points. We saw that even in week 1. They could score points, but can they stop anybody? How many wins can they get in the SAC if they can't stop anybody, Josh?
Yeah, that is by far the biggest question. And for Luers, you probably won't see a lot of offenses like that with so much talent, so much D1 talent at the wide receiver position. So that will definitely be a big one to keep an eye on. In all likelihood, also going to be our highlight zone game of the week as well. So definitely a lot to look forward to there. Probably the other SAC matchup I want to touch on, Wayne and Homestead. Wayne, very unfortunate that that game against South Bend Riley was called a no contest because they were definitely playing very well. Sherwood Haydock's crew was against South Bend Riley, and then Homestead. Two very tough results to open the season. They go down to Carmel. Very tough when you go down to that place, regardless of whether you're a Fort Wayne team, Indy area team, and then just really struggling against Noblesville. The weather probably didn't have a lot to help with that, but just kind of stumbling out of the gates, this Homestead crew has for the first couple of weeks.
And that's kind of the big thing, Josh, when we look at some of these teams in the SAC. Homestead, you look at the schedule and say, okay, it's tough first 2 weeks. Now we're past that. I think this is the first week where we really figure out who Homestead is at this point. Same with Carroll. But I think when you look at this matchup and Wayne and the running attack that Wayne has with Kamar Nelson, combated against Homestead that allowed almost 300 yards of rushing to Noblesville. It's a team that's giving up over 280 yards per game on the ground. Now you have to factor in the quality of opponent, right? Carmel and Noblesville. But at the same time, if you're looking at strength on strength, or at least the strength of Wayne, it is moving the ball on the ground with Kamar Nelson and their running back. So for Homestead can they get back to being able to be a physical team at the point of attack, particularly along that defensive front, and bottle up Wayne and Kamar Nelson? I think that's a really good matchup in the SAC. Another kind of barometer game here as we get back into SAC play to see just where these teams are at.
One more little nugget on the SAC. Do want to give a shout out to Concordia. First 2-0 start since 1978. Gotta love that for Tim Manigal and company. They do have a very tough test coming up Friday against Snyder, but hey, they could definitely soak in this 2-0 start so far. Let's go ahead and move on to the NE8 now. Looking at your matchups, you've got East Noble at Huntington North. We mentioned Mike Eschbach's crew starting off 2-0 against an East Noble squad that's going to be pretty fired up. Norwell at Leo, Belmont at Columbia City, then New Haven at DeKalb. So let's go back to that Huntington North and East Noble matchup. Huntington North did a very good job taking advantage of Northrop when the game picked up on Saturday. For East Noble, they're definitely going to be a little fired up after losing to Snyder and what was actually a competitive game for a few minutes and change before Lightning pushed that game back to Saturday.
Yeah, I was at Huntington North on Friday night, was able to see at least half of that game before it got pushed into Saturday afternoon with Northrop, and really impressed with what Huntington North was able to do. And they get wins over an Eastbrook team that is rebuilding a little bit, maybe not your traditional Eastbrook, and then Northrop that has all those weapons. So they've beaten two pretty solid teams. Okay, this is an empty 2-0 by any means for Huntington North, and it's year 2 with Mike Eschbach and his spread system that he brought to Huntington North, and everybody was kind of like, why are you going spread at Huntington North? But he said, it's going to be a little bit different look for people because everybody's used to us packing it in and all that stuff, and it's worked. I mean, Tony Decker's been very good at quarterback, accounted for multiple touchdowns in that win over Northrop. You have the Linker boys, whether it's running back, wide receiver, they're pretty dynamic. That offensive and defensive lines have really developed and are much better. This is a team that won one game last year, guys, and you look at now the opportunity that they have to maybe show exactly what they have against one of the top teams that we consider in the NE8. And now you get it at home. I think it's going to be as good of an atmosphere if we've seen a long time in Huntington, being 2-0. And Alex Stewart's team will be ready. They'll use last week as kind of that learning experience against Snyder. That's what they love to get with those big matchups. And so they'll take the lessons learned and they'll apply them to Huntington North. But make no mistake, Josh, this is a Huntington North team that you cannot take for granted anymore. And it's really exciting for the people in Huntington.
Could probably make a solid case that the matchup to watch in the NE8 this week, New Haven at DeKalb. DeKalb, coming off a heartbreaking overtime loss at Garrett the other day. And then New Haven, we probably were really quick to write off this New Haven team at the start of the season, but you got to give credit to Vance Shearer's crew. They've at least been very competitive in their first 2 games. Their 2 losses by combined 7 points. So the talent hasn't completely fallen off for New Haven.
No, exactly. I mean, DJ Simpson has been phenomenal at running back, 3 touchdowns over the weekend in that close loss to Bishop Luers. Yeah, credit to Vance Shearer. I mean, because this is a dude that has been on staff. And when you lose your head coach so close to the start of the season, when Kyle Boer took that administrative job at Angola, there was no time to do a proper coaching search. Everybody has jobs, right? So when you looked at it, is Shearer was very much thrust in that position, but it was continuity with the players, being an assistant. He knows the system, he knows the kids, and they believed in him. And we saw that kind of in the preseason a little bit with some cool videos with them out at New Haven, and you're like, okay, they seem like to be having fun. And I know 0-2 isn't fun, but the fact that they've been able to compete for 2 weeks, score points, and come close against two pretty solid teams, right, in the first 2 weeks with Northrop and Bishop Luers, I think it bodes well. So, preseason we look at New Haven going, man, how far down are they going to be in the NE8 this year? Maybe we underestimated them, and against DeKalb as a solid NE8 team, we'll find out just where New Haven is at right now. So that is going to be a very interesting game. And then, of course, DeKalb trying to get back in the win column after that furious comeback against Garrett, taken into overtime, and then they lose in OT. So it's going to be a good game with those two teams, and really see where both teams are at coming out of the non-conference.
We'll definitely get to Garrett in a little bit, but first I want to turn our attention to the ACAC. Looking at those matchups, Bluffton at South Adams, Heritage at Woodland, Southern Wells at Jay County, then Adams Central continuing non-conference play against Muncie Central. I do want to mention Adams Central, just to quote Mark Twain over here, the reports of Adams Central's demise were greatly exaggerated. 43-0 win over Eastside. I think Adams Central is going to be just fine with a lot of younger guys. Very convincing win over Eastside, and they can continue non-conference play against Muncie Central. Before we look at the other ACAC games, what stood out to you about Adams Central?
Well, getting back to basics for Adams Central, and I think we weren't counting Adams Central out by any means, but it's so rare to see them lose in the regular season. It always kind of takes you aback a little bit. But we saw Adams Central, which, yes, we knew with Jamison Roach they'd be a little bit more dynamic offensively, but what they did against Eastside offensively, only had 3 attempted passes, 40 runs, rushed for over 300 yards. I know that defense really shut down Lincoln Carter and that Eastside offense. It was a return to form. I'm sure that was the message throughout the week from Adams Central's coaching staff led by Michael Mosier is, hey, we need to get back to what we do best and not allow one loss to turn into multiple losses. And that's a series that in the last several years has been pretty competitive with Adams Central and Eastside. So for AC to do what they did to the Blazers was very impressive. And it puts the ACAC on notice if they somehow had forgotten about Adams Central, that no, they're not going anywhere.
So Adams Central, of course, they've been the team to beat in the ACAC, obviously making the jump to 2A this season. Really good battles, going on for the team that's probably going to finish in second place with matchups like Bluffton at South Adams, Heritage at Woodland, Heritage and Bluffton. We feel very good about them heading into ACAC play, and kind of a good test to see where they are as they enter conference play. Of course, you can never overlook Grant Mosier, his fabulous beard, and those Starfires, as well as Woodland. Coach Rohrbacher, 2 pretty competitive games so far. Coach Rohrbacher getting his first win against Central Noble the other night. And you know what? They had Eastside on the ropes for a good chunk. So 2 good matchups for Bluffton and for Heritage this Friday.
It is. And, looking at where the dynamic is going to be in this conference behind Adams Central, Bluffton wants to think that it can give Adams Central a run. Heritage wants to say the same thing. And we'll see what happens and see if anybody can challenge the Flying Jets. But I like Bluffton going to South Adams. Grant Mosier's squad maybe rebuilding a little bit with a lot of young kids. And you look at Bluffton last week or in week 2, Axton Best, the sophomore quarterback, threw 3 picks, Josh, but he was able to make up for it running for over 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that's the thing you're going to get with Axton Best, particularly a sophomore quarterback, is he's still learning, right? You're throwing him out there on Friday nights and varsity. He's going to make some decisions that aren't the best. 5 first-half turnovers by Bluffton, but they did enough in the second half to beat Manchester. I think you're going to see a more focused group for Bluffton heading into Bern on Friday night. And then Heritage, it should be a very interesting one to see if the Patriots can continue that run. They have a great senior class that really paces them, and we'll see if they can continue their winning ways in the ACAC.
Let's turn our attention now to the NECC. You got Angola at Fremont, Eastside at West Noble, Garrett at Busco, Jimtown at Fairfield, LaVille at Central Noble, and Prairie Heights at Lakeland. Now, heading into this week, before Eastside's loss to Adams Central, you could probably make a solid case with the matchup of the week in the NECC being Eastside West Noble, the two conference division champs from last year. But West Noble and the Fighting Seth Pruitts, they look like they are still the team to beat in the NECC's big division. I mean, Pruitt, 22 carries, 164 yards, and if I did not fudge this right, 7 touchdowns. Simply outstanding from the young man. He's getting another touchdown probably as I'm speaking right now.
It was a great performance by Seth Pruitt. And, West Noble is more than Pruitt for sure, but man, he really sets the tone for that team. If they can move the ball on the ground with Seth Pruitt, they are very difficult to beat. And that's what they were able to do on Friday night. That's what they're going to try to do this coming Friday against Eastside. Eastside's going to try to bounce back. That division, when we look at the big division, is really kind of interesting with West Noble in there. Eastside is kind of that team to beat in the small division, with this kind of being a cross-divisional game. So we'll see if Eastside can hang a little bit. But West Noble is really rolling, and when Seth Pruitt is on, he's one of those kids, Josh, that I really wish. And I don't want to take him away from West Noble. Monty Mayhorter doesn't want that. But if you placed him in the SAC to see just how his game would translate into the SAC, because so many times people say, well, he's beaten up on inferior competition in the NECC or ACC or whatever. And you kind of want to see him, because I think he's one of those players that regardless of where you put him and where he's playing, he's going to be a dynamic player. But lucky for West Noble, he's a Charger, and he continues to rack up big yardage and big touchdown totals already this season.
No, definitely a special playmaker with Pruitt. So like we mentioned, probably the matchup to watch in the NECC this week. Probably the other one, keeping an eye on Prairie Heights at Lakeland as well. So that'll do it for the 4 main conferences in Northeast Indiana. Like we mentioned, Justin, week 3 conference play getting underway in earnest. What are you most excited about as we finally turn our attention to conference games across the 260?
Well, I think that's it, Josh. I think we finally are able to see these teams in a conference atmosphere, and we can kind of throw out, okay, Carroll didn't look good doing this, that, or the other. Homestead didn't do this. We have a plethora of 2-0 teams that want to prove that they're legit. So now that we get into the conference slate, the SAC, NE8, ACAC, etc., is now we can see where these teams slot in. Can Wayne be a threat in the small division in the SAC? Can Homestead and Carroll be those teams to challenge Snyder? What about Bishop Dwenger after that great performance against Moeller, despite that final score not showcasing that? Can Dwenger be a factor? These are questions that we're finally going to have start getting answered now that we're done with non-conference for the most part, and we're jumping into the league slate. So that's kind of what I'm excited about, and hopefully no lightning allowed on Friday night.
No kidding. No kidding. No more weather delays, please. Let's get some games from start to finish. Well, once again, he's Justin Kenny. I'm Josh Shane. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Inside the Zone on Wayne.com. We'll see you next week for week number 4.